Again, we're pleased to have you join us. I'm Dan Sweet. I'm Director of Public Relations and Communications for HAI. We're pleased that you took time out of your schedule to watch the webinar today. We do have an exciting group of people to talk with, so I'm going to get things started. Our first speaker today, as always, nearly always, is Jim Viola, the President and CEO of Helicopter Association International. We have Francisco Escoval, who is a member of the safety analysis team for the helicopter safety team in Chile. We have Chris Lowenstein, a Lockheed Martin fellow with Sikorsky, Lockheed Martin Company. Loreto Moraga, who is president of the Chilean Helicopter Association. Jennifer Peasley, who is the SMS manager for Air Methods. We have Bruce Webb, who is the director of aviation education and community outreach with Airbus. And with him in the same camera and moderating today is Chris Hill, our Director of Safety here at Helicopter Association International. As always, these webinars are interactive. We do encourage your participation. Do look forward to hearing your questions and comments. If you have questions, those are the ones we really try to pay attention to so we can try to answer them at the end. Please use the question module. We will absolutely see every one of those and try to include them as quickly as we can. The question module should either be at the bottom of your screen or on the side of your screen, depending on the device you're using. We will do our best to get to every question today. We may not be able to get to all of them, and we will do our best though. These webinars are recorded. We do encourage you to share the video recordings. You will receive a link to this after the fact, probably tomorrow, maybe as late as Monday, but we will get to them as quickly as possible. Feel free to share them or view them again at your convenience. And so with that, I would like to introduce Jim Viola, the President and CEO of HAI.
Thanks, Dan. So yeah, it was great knocking out those polls to get things kicked off, and you do have to worry about that word nearly, because every time you say always, there's always going to be some reason why it wasn't 100%. So thanks for that. We've been doing these webinars now for about 18 months, and the topic today focuses on safety programs, programs and procedures. And today it's from companies and associations from around the world. During the last 18 months, we've had a number of webinars centered on safety issues in our industry, featuring speakers who joined us to share their knowledge and their expertise. And today is not going to be any different. One of the things that makes our industry special is that so many businesses are willing to share information about the safety programs. We know our industry is naturally competitive, and we know that each company needs to turn a profit in order to stay in business. But I am ever so grateful that companies that could be business rivals instead focus on improving safety throughout the world of rotorcraft. To reinforce that concept, we can look at VAST, which you might have seen us talking about in a previous webinar. Of course, VAST, which replaced the International Helicopter Safety Team. So we have VAST now, that stands for the Vertical Aviation Safety Team, a global alliance of aviation safety organizations. And one of the strongest elements of VAST is the international sharing of proven safety plans and programs. Many accidents occur in our industry for the same reasons, regardless of where the helicopter is located. The businesses that make up these international organizations are always looking for methods to reduce accidents. And so when one finds something that works, we all benefit through them sharing that information. Crowdsourcing successful safety programs is something that Chris Hill and HAI greatly support. We have a great staff that produces amazing work, but we will always share the safety efforts of external sources when we are allowed to do so, like on today's webinar. So before we begin the webinar, please let me thank our panelists in advance. We normally do this at the end of the webinar, but I would like the panelists now to turn their cameras on and offer my thanks to Loreto and Francisco of the Asociación Chilena de Helicópteros, Jennifer from Air Methods, Chris from Sikorsky, and of course, Bruce from Airbus. We thank them for joining with us today and to share their knowledge and their experience. I'm so proud of these organizations and the companies for doing what they can to support rotorcraft safety across the industry And with most of these, I've been working 5 to 10 to 15 years with these people. So thank you very much today. There are many other companies also that do this, and I want to thank them also today for sharing that information. So Chris, over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Jim. Pleasure to have you with us today, welcoming our team. I couldn't have said it better. Thanks so much to all of them. And thanks, Bruce, for joining me in Alexandria, Virginia here. We're trying to open things up ever so gently and slightly on pace with what is reasonable. And it's really nice to have you here and actually be out here with everybody else.
Thank you.
And then also thanks to the over 80 folks who've tuned in today. We've been doing these webinars and all of you have been tuning in for so long to virtual conferences, meetings, and it's, I suspect, quite a bit exhausting. So what we're going to do today, hopefully you'll stay engaged and ask lots of questions. This is a virtual roundtable. Unfortunately, we can't all be together sharing our thoughts with you, but we'll do our best to make it be as interactive and loose and free and engaging as we can. And speaking of engaging, for those of you who are tuned in looking for wings credit, we believe this is accredited for wings. If that is what you're seeking, we hope you're here for more than just wings credit. But if you do tune in for wings credit, make sure you stay engaged, answer the questions, participate in the surveys to ensure you get the full credit you deserve. And speaking of surveys, we'll go ahead and kick off with one more survey to open our first block today. And that basically is, for those of you who know what an SMS is, how would you describe it and how you interact with it today? Please take a moment to answer that question. And while the answers are coming in, Dan is going to keep track of that and we'll display the results here in a moment. The first block we're going to go into is talking about SMS. And we have a couple of our guests today on our panel, Chris Lowenstein from Sikorsky and Jennifer Peasley from Air Methods, both represent organizations that took the long slog and actually completed the FAA's voluntary SMS program. And they are approved to having completed that. That is no small task, and we're very proud of them. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that experience and then how that might translate into what you can learn from their experience, whether you're doing the FAA's program or your own program overseas, wherever you prefer to do it. So Dan, let's go ahead and display what we have. About 67% participated. Looks like we got a pretty good distribution, a pretty effective, or at least getting off on the right track. And then finally, they recognize they need it. And finally, other software developers, they're participating. For those of you who are the other industry professionals who tuned in today, we suspect you're part of that 15%. Thank you for what you do. We know this is no small task for you as well. And happy to see a panel that we don't have anybody who needs to know what an SMS is, so we can just dive right in. So let's go ahead and start with you, Jennifer, with Air Methods. Let's just talk real quickly about Air Methods. A little bit about what you do and your part you played in the SMS experience, and any initial thoughts just from the high level on that process.
Well, thanks for having me, everyone. And yeah, so a little bit about Air Methods. We're the largest helicopter organization outside the military in the United States. So we have over 350 bases right now. We're air medical services. We have both fixed and rotor wing, and I think we've got just over 5,000 employees at present. Oh yes, and we transport, I think right now we're trending a little bit higher than that 64,000 patients a year. Yeah, so that's a little bit of what we do. We've got Airbus, Bell helicopters, and then we're operating some Beechcraft and Pilatus. So that's kind of the bread and butter of who we are. So yeah, so implementing a SMS, I think we believe that safety is our highest priority. And that's why Air Methods went ahead and joined the voluntary program. And so I'm the SMS manager, so I'm responsible for helping make sure we get that implementation completed, which we did in May, which was a huge win for us and really exciting. And now overseeing it and making sure that we're continually improving those processes and just doing better.
Thanks, Jennifer, for that intro. Chris, I'll jump over to you real briefly. Can you describe pretty succinctly what the voluntary program is and how that might differ from the other viewers here who are not in the US? And what they can take from the general concepts of the program you experienced?
Sure. So I'm not the SMS manager for Sikorsky, but he is attending the seminar. So Marty, if anything comes up that I completely get wrong, be sure to type it in the chat and we'll correct it. But really what the FAA voluntary program did was take the standard SMS with your 4 pillars and kind of put some framework around that and try to establish a commonality so that everybody's basically on the same sheet of music. And Sikorsky had to, several times attempted to initiate an SMS, but without that solid framework, we weren't as successful as we wanted to be. So once we had that FAA framework to really work around and to really give us that guidance, that really helped us drive it down that path. One of the things that Marty Simpson, who is our SMS manager, as I mentioned, has emphasized is that the top leadership buy-in and complete buy-in is so essential. If you don't have that, you're not going to get anywhere. We know that we have bottom-up and top-down approaches, but without the top completely on board, you're really going to go nowhere. Getting the right data management systems in place is huge. There's so much data involved in SMS to be managed and handled properly that's really, really important. And probably the biggest issue, particularly with a large organization, and Jennifer with Air Methods, I'm sure went through the same thing, is just inertia. We're big in a big organization, and it takes a long time to change that super tanker, to turn it really slowly to get it down a new path, because we've always done things one way and now we're going to do things a different way. That's really a challenge. And I know that we talk frequently about the small operators and SMS. How are we going to do that with no staff? And it is a challenge, not going to deny that, but you have fewer people to get on board and to train with the new tasks that we have to handle.
That's a good point there, Chris. You talked about the large ship that you have to steer to make change. It's not going to happen overnight. And you did touch on a little bit about the difference between small and large. So Jennifer, what are your thoughts on what advice would you offer? Air Methods has so many resources dispersed over so many regions of regional safety managers, a manager in charge of the regional safety managers, a VP, an executive VP, a whole truckload of people managing safety, yourself, focused solely on the SMS program. What about that small operator, the chief pilot who's also the owner, who's also the safety manager, who's also the director of operations or maintenance perhaps? What advice can you offer them to simplify, demystify this process just to get started?
Well, I think first and foremost is you got to keep it simple, right? I think it's really easy to over-engineer and overcomplicate and everything when, if you just keep in mind, you keep it simple, you get buy-in from everyone. One of the things that worked really well for us and to Chris's point is getting everyone on the same page. You need all of your leadership to buy into the SMS process, because without that, you get selective engagement and then it doesn't work, right? So for us, it was having internal champions. So I think even for a small organization, if you can get your chief pilot on board and you can get your executives speaking the same language and championing SMS, then it becomes easier to cascade it down through the organization and to get people to understand. And I think there's also the promotional aspect of it, right? And that for a smaller organization, I think that's probably a little bit easier and showing that the system works. So for us, we focus on reporting wins. We let our teammates know when they report something, we fix it and we highlight that so that we get folks seeing how this is going to work for them and how that this builds a better safety culture. So I think, but just keep it simple and build those collaborative relationships internally and with the FAA. If you're working with a transparent relationship, I think it was easier to get everyone on board and move everything in the right direction.
Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer. Real quick, just a reminder, we have no questions coming in just yet. That's why we created these blocks of topics to get us started. But looking forward to you guys sending in your questions. So please send them in. If you want to talk specific about SMS, safety culture, any of those types of items, this is the time period to send in those questions. We did receive one advanced question from somebody. We're going to leave the name anonymous, but they're concerned about the idea of reporting and some hesitation to report. And Loreto, let's talk a little bit about SMS and safety culture, and in particular reporting culture, and the challenges and any ideas that you can offer in overcoming the problems with reporting.
Hello, everyone. Well, that's a huge history, at least here in Latin America. first of all, I would like to describe that in Chile, that the SMS is mandatory for commercial operators. Yeah, so we are accomplished now a good standard of SMS. However, it is not customized for a VTOL aircraft. Yeah, basically the content of the SMS courses are provided by the Aviation Authority. Yeah, but was designed for fixed wing and not for a rotorcraft. So we here as HST Chile are trying very hard to get that change. First thing. Now, regarding the reporting, that's a big issue because here at least we have a very repressive culture. You know, this approach, this kind of corporate defense of each company that is trying maybe not to really be available to receive the feedback. Yeah, someone want to speak up and sometimes that is not very well received. Yeah, sometimes that could be repressive by the chief, by the manager, by the mates in the company. It doesn't depend if the company is small or big. Yeah, it's a matter of culture, I think. I don't know. I'm not sure if this is something local, regional in Latin America or not. Let's see in this conversation. But at least here we have a very repressive culture and not proactive culture. Yeah, the market here is very small. So usually when you know that someone was speaking up an incident or an accident or a risk, the rest of the people is very competitive and they figure out who might be, according to the type of the aircraft or the place where this happened, that could be that company or that guy. And the gossip there is very, very fast, and that irritates the people to really, really be honest and really do that, to speak up and to tell what is really happening. So, in fact, in the paper, we are accomplished with the SMS. But in the fact, yeah, this repressive attitude or reaction makes a huge gap between the paper and the reality. Yeah, at least here is what is happening.
Yeah, that's a good summary. You know, the evolution of a safety culture and SMS and a reporting culture in particular to really kick that off the ground. It's no small challenge. And so for the question that came in, we feel your pain. We understand. All of what we can offer is things that have worked for us. You know, for me, Bruce, you know, just being honest and having that integrity you need and figuring out what is your personal limit and making it be about you, right. Making it be about me and saying, hey, look, I'm sorry, we've hit my limit. I can't continue further. And I hope you can understand. Maybe you can help educate me, but we're at my limit. And so there's another question that just came in for Jay Heffernan, and that's a good segue because Jennifer mentioned a buy-in from the leadership. And Jay Heffernan says, hey, how important is that statement from the accountable executive about their commitment to safety? You know, there's words and then there's actions. Tell us a little bit about that, Bruce.
Right. Well, just like Chris said and Loreto reinforced, and of course, Jennifer knows extremely well, it takes the support of the executive team and their commitment to safety to make this work. And I do think the accountable executive, their words and their commitment to the program is critical. But in that same vein, we must remember too often in life, we seek perfection before releasing anything. And we must stop doing that. We must reach a point where what we have is sufficient to begin, and then we can't be afraid to stumble. And quite honestly, and I understand your point very well, Loreto, I think what you're describing about people trying to distill from the information who had the incident or what happened, you know what? At the end of the day, that's shame on them, not shame on the person who reported the information accurately and respectfully with the heart to improve safety. So we must lead by example, do the right thing. And if people castigate or criticize for that, that's really something we can't control. And I think that will diminish over time because, yeah, we all have incidents and things that are, not attractive. And yeah, we should be proud and hold and lift up the people that are brave enough to tell the truth.
Okay, good advice. We could have a whole webinar about reporting and cracking that code. So unfortunately, we can't dwell on that forever. We wish you the best of luck and stay strong, be honest with yourself. And when you hit your limit, it might be time to move on. And it's tough. It's a tough advice to give, but not knowing the specifics of that situation, that's all we can offer in this setting here. So, okay, on to the next one. Chris Young, one of our active safety working group, vice chair, no, secretary. Chris asked, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, and I'm going to go over to you, Jennifer, because I don't want to put you on the spot again, Chris. How do you recommend a small operator participate in the FAA's SMS VP program? It's kind of burdensome, takes a long time. What have you learned from your experience that might accelerate the process, or you could encourage a small operator to hang in there and go ahead and go through the process ahead of any impending requirements that might be coming down the way?
I think, well, I do think, we've always at Air Methods chosen to be early adopters, and that in a sense has helped us so that when regulation or change comes down the pipe, we're already ready for it. But I would also encourage you, I think when you really look at the SMS, it looks cumbersome, but I think at the end of the day, most operators are already doing many of the aspects that are required by the SMS. So what we found going through that gap analysis was we had many of the reporting mechanisms in place. And yeah, there was process and policy change that was necessary, but many of those things were already in place. And so it was just educating our employees that, look, you're already doing this. We're not adding more. It's just learning to define it as SMS and recognizing that these safety practices are already in place. And so I would encourage them to take a close look and to sort of do that gap analysis and look at where they already are, and then kind of determine, what does it look like for us to go ahead and push through on this.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jennifer. And just to add on to that, you don't have to get it all done. You got to get started. So right. It's too big of an elephant to eat all at once. We know that. If it takes 5 years, it takes 5 years. But if your POI has a good relationship with you and the ongoing relationship, and they come around and they know you're putting in your effort, that's a good start. And talk to folks like Chris Young and your insurance provider. They're going to be very interested in your pathway to get an SMS, whether it's through the voluntary program or on your own. What's important is that you're doing it, not that which program you're a part of. So I keep that in mind as well. Next question, courses. So let's go ahead and ask you, Francisco, training for SMS. There's lots of courses out there. We could go on and on. You could Google it. You can go crazy with free subscriber courses. I think HAI Academy probably has a course that you can log into. If you're a member, you get that for free. But how about training and education down in South America that's available that you're aware of, Francisco?
Well, you are so right. There are many courses available there, but as Loreto put it on clear, it's not customized for helicopters, not even for every different industries. It's so different from offshore than for private or corporate or even aerial work. So I guess that many companies don't have in place or have an effective SMS is the cultural change. And I believe that by training, we can change that culture to make pilots aware of the real risk in the operations. More than regulations, more than procedures or text, we need conviction. Bruce said in one way or another, in the beginning, the others look to you like you are wrong, but after time, they change their mind and they figure out that you are right, and they will follow. So training is essential, I guess. It's part of the solution.
Yeah, thanks, Francisco. And for those listening in who also possess a lot more knowledge than I do, and perhaps maybe one or two of our panelists, we don't have all the answers. We don't even pretend to. So if you possess the knowledge specific to the questions that are coming in, feel free to answer those in the chat box and address everyone. And we'll make sure that everyone has access to that information. One question that came in, and this is for you, Chris, and maybe a spillover back over to you, Bruce. So it's, they understand that from the operator's perspective, most of the operators get it, what SMS is and safety reporting. But from the standpoint of the OEM and your SMS, what kind of hazard reporting identification methods do you use, and how might they parallel what operators are doing in industry? Are they the same? I suspect you have a few different categories of flights that you're actually doing that might drive up your risk a little bit. Chris, you want to start with that?
Yeah, so we basically have several different reporting methods. We're working towards a one alert system where there will be one Sikorsky alert for safety, and because we're adapting the legacy systems of the past, we have internal alerts for our own flight test operations and things like that. And then we have external alerts where our field service reps typically initiate those in close coordination with our customers as they're operating, where they've come across an issue that needs to be elevated. So, as part of our SMS, we're trying to integrate those to make one alert where then it goes down individual paths as required, but we don't have to argue about, well, should this be an internal alert, an external alert, or this kind of alert or that kind of alert. But to Jennifer's point, in creating your overall SMS, it's recognition that you're already doing most of these things, and what we really need to do is integrate them under the umbrella of SMS to make that part of the system. So to your point, Chris, yes, we do have different levels of alerts, and some for our internal flight test operations and some for our customers' flight operations, and that's typically through a field service rep. But they all end up in the same, what we call the same funnel, and get addressed by our safety teams and engineers.
All right, well, it looks like we're coming to the end of the SMS block. We're going to have to move on. But before we do, you guys understand in business that you got to show me the money. Is it working? So there's the ever-present question, does an SMS prevent accidents? And the short answer is not necessarily, right? So I think if yes, any of the insurance providers who might be listening in, they're like, hey, we want you to have a solid, effective SMS, and we also want you to not have accidents. We want both, and one does not necessarily guarantee the other. So I think that is that's obvious. But is there any data out there? Jennifer, you've done a lot of operations at Air Methods. Are you able to answer that question with any certainty? Did your data show that, could you correlate or at least associate when you really ramped up your SMS program that did you have any changes in your accident incident data?
We definitely saw, decreases in some of the trends that we saw throughout in terms of like reporting. I don't know that we could directly correlate that to our, accidents and incidents necessarily at this point. We're still collecting a lot of data, but, there's things that we, historically knew had been issues. And then, through the proactive treatment of those things, we were able to mitigate those and see efficiencies throughout our organization on the operational side of the house and also on our business side of the house. Where we've been able to take feedback from our teammates as well and drive down some of those things like personal injuries and things like that, because we can promote and address those things that we're seeing through our reporting mechanisms.
Great, Jennifer, thanks. There's lots more questions that came in. Tim Booth asked a question about dragged loads. And I will just ask our team listening in, could you just direct them to the webinar site and perhaps the title of the webinar we had with external loads to answer Tim's Booth's question. Thank you, Tim. And Jay Effernan, yes, you're right. Rather than going at this blindly, if you go into the part 5 of the 14 CFR, you're going to find the actual SMS, the full teeth to tail SMS. What ultimately becomes a requirement for the Part 135 operators might be cherry picked from that. It might be in totality. It might be scalable. None of us are certain. That's what some of the debate is ongoing right now. But use that as a start point. There's also been some collaborative efforts for SMS ICG, which is a ICAO/FAA a collaborative effort. If you go to Skybrary or something like that and type in SMS ICG, you will find compressed guides there, better checklist maybe for you. They even have dedicated checklists for small operators. So I think we're going to have to draw down the SMS conversation. We got halfway through the block. As a reminder to everybody, we have 3 main topic areas today, and we've just hit 1/3 of the time block allocated. So I think we're on track. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up the next survey question, if you would, Dan, and let's have a chat about that one. So everybody who's listening in, what do you think the cause of the next fatal helicopter accident is going to be worldwide? You know, we had another wire strike incident just recently, but thankfully the pilot was not injured. Let's go ahead and give your thoughts on that. All right, looks like we're getting a pretty good participation here, ticking up above 50%. It's settling down. Dan, go ahead and show it whenever you think we're ready.
Looks like it's still coming in, maybe just another 10, 15 seconds.
Okay.
There we go. Looks like it
All right.
smoothed out.
So it looks like we have a pretty good distribution of human factors leaning heavily toward the pilot air crew. Sometimes they're the only people who are touching the controls and not getting involved. But it's good that people are acknowledging human factors in supervisory and organizational levels. That's really helpful. What do you think about these, Bruce? How does it reflect on the realities?
Right. So I would say my opinion is that it's really what I would expect to see, that pilot air crew is the preponderance of the potential causal agent for the accident. However, I guess if I were voting, I would have said supervisory and organizational. And I'm not saying that to lay blame on someone other than the pilot or the flight crew or the technicians or the people that are working on the aircraft, because really that survey question lays out 3/4 of the potential factors are human, whether it's the organizational, the pilot, the maintenance, and in fact, equipment malfunction. What percent of equipment malfunction can be led or we can draw back to human factors? And it's a high percentage. So I think it's easy to look at an accident and maybe the wire strike, you know, and again, I know nothing about it. I know what anyone else on this call knows about the wire strike incident. And it's easy to blame the pilot and say, hey, listen, you know, the pilot, he was too tired to fly, or whatever we want to say was the root cause of that person's inattention, which allowed him to strike a wire. But does it go deeper than that? Was there a, whether he was the owner operator or he worked for a larger organization, was there an underlying perceived pressure or real pressure? Because oftentimes we'll hear people say, well, you know, I had external pressure to do this. A lot of that external pressure, honestly, is generated internally because we don't ask the question to find out the answer. We just believe we know. We say to ourselves, well, you know what? I got to fly to make money. The company needs money. I got to fly to make money. You know, you're not really giving then the management team the opportunity to say, listen, you know, a faux pas, an incident, a small, not forget an accident, just an incident can erase any potential revenue for this day. So let's step back and reevaluate. So I'm not saying it's short-sighted to look only at the flight crew. I'm saying that to really do this justice, we need to look beyond that. And I think, yeah, we all as participants in the safety business need to look beyond to see what the ultimate root cause may be.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, I think we discovered in, you know, some of us who are fortunate enough to have been in the military who dedicated a lot of time and energy and assets, and there was not a litigious nature to the investigation that could really peel back the onion and get to all the contributing factors that, you know, that daisy chain of events, that Swiss cheese, whatever you want to call it. So Chris, you've spent a lot of time in accident investigation, and you work with an OEM that's done a lot of effort on the engineering side to drive down that mechanical component. And What's left is the human factors, and, you know, truth be told, but it's not just at the end result with the pilot. So thoughts and your opinions on where we are currently in accident investigation and how much attention is being paid to those supervisory and organizational levels.
Yeah, there's definitely a huge increase in how much attention is being paid towards those factors. You know, when I started 25 years ago as an investigator, we didn't use the term crew error or human error. We just said pilot error, and that was very limiting, and it wasn't fair. And but that was the state of the industry at the time. Since then, some of the advances included the development of HVACs, which I think was a huge step forward in diving really deep into the human factors that include the supervisory and organizational levels. It included all of those different things. And, you know, I think most of us on the call are familiar with HVACs and Chappelle and Wigman, and we've heard it several times. We've seen it, we've used it, and it really helped open our eyes to the different levels of human error that contribute to an accident. I had a boss who one time said, every single accident is a human error accident because humans designed it, humans put it together, and humans flew it. And that's indeed true, and it is even true for unmanned aircraft. So, you know, while we won't say pilot error or crew error anymore, there are still human errors in all of those different things. And when we look at a modern aircraft designed and built to our current level of specifications, the mechanical malfunction is a tiny, tiny percentage. And so we really have to pay attention to what is creating these human errors and what can we do to mitigate them and, better yet, eliminate them.
Thanks, Chris. You know, we all know that pilot or that air crew did not set out to go crash a helicopter. You know, they didn't do their pre-briefing of, okay, let's go crash. You know, it's not happening that way. We know that. Yet sometimes we think the investigators are spring-loaded to just assume that. So you go back further in the process, and clearly in the supervisory and organizational levels, there's a key word here, and there's a question that came in for you, Bruce, related to training. So where does training fit in here, and whose responsibility is it for training? Is it the pilots, the air crew, the supervisors, or the organization, or all of them?
All right. So, yeah, it's a great question. So a frustrating thing for me is that we often worry too much about whether training, if we get credit for training credits, or, you know, if it's required training. And the reality is, whether training is required or not, it's necessary. And as we look at more modern aircraft with features and systems installed, you know, we have systems on board aircraft now that will pre-warn you that you may be nearing vortex ring state, or you know, they're providing information to you, but it's not without a cost, and the cost is you must learn to use it and you must learn to understand it. And so I think we should look at training as a responsibility for all of us, not only executive management to define and allow and have a budget for training, but also for it to flow back up for pilots and technicians to say, listen, you know what, I could really use a class on whatever it is. So we all need to take responsibility for it, and we all need to take the time to do it correctly. And it can be, I know it's costly, but if we don't train to use things correctly, people won't use them. You can have an automatic flight control system on board an aircraft, which is superb. But if you don't use it, or you're not trained to use it correctly, when you need it most, you're likely not to use it. So, you know, manufacturers, you know, we can build the fantastic machines. And I think largely in our business, we build fantastic machines. I think our industry, we have some fantastic helicopters out there, but we're not always using them to their potential because we didn't prepare ourselves to use them to their potential. So, yeah. You know, yeah. Flying a back in the day, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when we flew around in a Jet Ranger, that wasn't much different than a Hughes 500. It had the same engine, had the same radios, had the same fuel control system. But today, a Bell 407 is not anything like a 350, which is not any, or an H125, and it's not anything like a 92 or a 225 or a 139. I mean, they're all different. It takes training to learn those differences.
Yeah. And we're going to talk a little bit about technology in the next block. So we'll save some of our rounds for that. But continuing in the human factors and aeronautical decision-making, Francisco or Loreto, whoever you want to jump on this, how you're in the safety analysis team down in South America, and what are you finding? Are you mirroring some of the same problems, and what specific area are you seeing more of the issues in human factors?
Well, as Bruce just said, the training is very important in human factors. We guess it's necessary to move from handling maneuvers to the scenario-based training, where pilots have to decide what to do in different conditions. Because as you said, today many of the helicopters are with autopilot or best technology. So it's not about how to handle the helicopter, it's what to do with that machine. And it's an instance to learn. It's not just to get a rank. So it has to be the first priority, the trainee and the instructor. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Francisco. Anything to add, Loreto?
Yes, well, I was thinking about you said, Bruce, about the organization. I think this is a key. That's a key, the organization, because the training now basically is focused on the pilot, the crew, maintenance, but the managers, they are never trained in safety, in the day-to-day safety. And they have to make the decision. They have to sign the contracts. Yeah, and when they sign the contract, they never take care about the conditions that are required for the operation that maybe could be risky, or maybe they are accepting fines and sanctions for something that is risky and should not be acceptable in the contract. Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that public bids here in Chile for firefighting, for example, are not well designed from the perspective of the safety. Yeah, and we as Helicopter Association, we go before the authority, the people who design this public bid, to say you are doing wrong because you are putting these people, this operation in danger. Yeah, looking for efficiency. Yeah, so I think the training and the human factor has to be viewed with a very ample perspective. Yeah, and include the management and not only train crew, pilots, maintenance, also the rest of the management, the service providers. I'm a lawyer. I'm an aviation lawyer. Yeah, but I have to learn about the safety. I did myself the SMS course in order to understand what was my work consequences for the people who are providing the services. So human factor is more ample that we may figure out now.
Yeah, good points there. For those of you who are in the chat, dropping in some really helpful commentary. Some of those are going to everyone, which is awesome. Others, you're just sending it to the panelists and the host. Cannot guarantee we're going to get to be able to relay those chats. So please, if you feel strongly enough, go ahead and let everybody know your thoughts and share that wisdom with more than just the panel here. Let's briefly, since we're talking about training, let's do a transition question and talk about the cost of training and how hard it is to sustain training and alternatives to drive down that cost, or creative ways. So it was hinted at a moment ago. I mean, I came from a background of where 60% of my flight time was training. So you couldn't even do 6% of your flight time probably in the commercial world and sustain. I'm not sure what the numbers are. So Jennifer, can you talk about, how much time Air Methods dedicates to in-aircraft and perhaps other forms of training?
So I don't know that I would be the best person to speak to that, but I do know that they make training a high priority. Our operations team works with all of our different disciplines across the organization to ensure that our teammates and our management are getting the training that they desire, and also that we feel. And, you know, I know that one of the big things we work on is making sure that they're educated on pressure to fly and things like that. So, but yeah, I could definitely follow up and find out, but that's probably all I know on that.
No worries. Chris, you know, you're an OEM. You got the bottom line at heart too, but you don't want your pilots going out and breaking aircraft either. So how much time you dedicate to training, and what about simulation?
Right. We do a fair amount of training, and we do a lot of simulation. We have training partners. We have our own training academy. So we do, you know, as much as we can. And as you know, most of our pilots, if not all of them, are coming from the military pipeline. So they're used to that, maybe not Coast Guard level, but a high level of training percentage. So they come with that expectation, and we try to accommodate as much as we can. You know, a lot of the times when we're out doing torque flights, you know, where we're just running time on the aircraft, do all kinds of training evolutions just to take advantage of that time, that sort of thing.
That's great. So yeah, that's all well and good, but how about those small operators that are listening in, personal, private? We're trying to convince those folks not to just go jetting around without maintaining some level of what some might call competency, proficiency, and you still don't have a lot of money. So how do you get that quality training? You know, so I mean, maybe it's just on the way back from that flight, you go ahead and grab that approach if you have an instrument qualified aircraft, because that is a very perishable skill. Maybe you challenge yourself and don't just fly along the beach or just do the scenic route, but you challenge yourself and do a few things. What do you advise your crews when you were chief pilot at Airbus?
Right. Yeah, I do think those are all important things. We must, you know, the time it takes when you're returning or you're ferrying aircraft somewhere, or quite honestly, you're doing a test flight, but you're coming back from the flight. You know, yeah, honestly, if it's not busy, contact approach and pick up a clearance if you like, or at least go shoot the approach, right? You can shoot an approach VFR, maintain VMC. So there's opportunities. Always challenge yourself to be better. When you come back, you know, did you do something to make yourself just a little bit better? Did you try to fly your course with more fidelity? Were you holding your altitude with fidelity? Were you what were you doing to improve yourself? I do want to jump back to something Loreto said, though, that's very important. And that is, when we talk about management and how we behave, the majority of communication is not oral. It's not. It's our body language. And so when we're talking about training, so back to when someone comes to you and says, hey, listen, I just over torqued the helicopter, I just oversped it, I over temped it, I don't know, whatever they did, your words and your body language will dictate what that person does in the future. So if they walk in and say, hey, you know what, I just hot started that ship, and you say, okay, that's fine. Okay, I said, okay, that's fine. But my body language said, you got to be freaking kidding me. And the message I've sent to that person is, that's not acceptable. And I won't say you're in trouble, but I don't want to hear that again. That's what you've really told them. And the next time something similar happens, they're going to think about whether they want to tell you. And so we go back to training. We need to learn how to interact with our subordinates, superiors, and peers in a way which is open and allows real communication. It doesn't mean you have to say, well, yippee, I'm so glad you smoked the engine. But it does mean you say, you know what, I understand. I'm sorry that happened. I'm certain any one of us on this call have had this happened. We've had someone tell us something like this. The person telling us this is twice as disturbed as we are. So it's okay. We should empathize. Say, you know what? I understand. This is disturbing. So go ahead and fill out a report and let's talk about this, and we'll make sure it doesn't happen again. Be sincere. But so that's part of the training we need. It isn't just how to fly the helicopter. It isn't how to maintain the helicopter. It's how to interact with people so we don't put people down. We allow open, honest conversation, because you'll learn a lot if you encourage honesty. It revolves around honesty. So anyway, I don't know how I got to that, but you made me think of that,
Yeah.
Loreto, and I wanted to come back.
Well, I think we're drawing to the end of this human factors block, but we got a comment from and a question from Gabriel Amato, who a repeat attendee. So thanks for the question and comment. So Gabriel, it looks like based on his question that he's primarily a manager, but he took he wanted to get a pilot's license so he could have a better understanding of his operation. And he was wondering if is there data to show that returns good results, or they make better managers. I doubt that there's much study been done on that, but I'd say good for you, Gabriel, that you want to understand the culture and the technical aspects and the operational aspects of your operation. You're certainly going to be better off for doing that. Leading by example. I can't say enough good things about that. So good question. Don't know if I have a good answer for you. Anybody else have any thoughts there? Loreto, anything on that? Leading by example. You do a lot of leadership. You look like you stay pretty engaged and you take on a lot. And having the experience and knowledge that goes with operating in those organizations, those entities, certainly goes a long way, right?
Absolutely. I think that, well, sometimes I receive some questions from another lawyers, aviation lawyers, say how you practice your aviation law. Say never from the desk. Never from the desk. You have to stand up, walk and go to the maintenance centers and go and lunch with the pilot. And you have to be really involved. If you are not involved, if you don't understand what they are doing, you will never be a good aviation lawyer. Never.
Right. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for that. All right. I'm psyched. We're going to the next and final phase of this, and it's technology. So Dan, can you take us to that next and final survey question? All right.
Away we go.
Safety technology. So this one's a little bit more complex. What technologies do you think have the best potential to enhance safety? And you only get one choice. You can't say everything. So we're just very curious to see which direction our viewers are leaning in. Where do they think these technologies are going to take us the farthest? And Dan, is this poll visible to everyone as it's coming in, or we have to share it?
I believe we have to share it.
Okay. All right, looks like a pretty good distribution so far coming in. Just about 50% of those listening in. The other 50%, we're trying to wake up. Come on, this is the last section. It's the most interesting one. No more wonky SMS and human factors. We're going to talk high technology.
100%.
There we go. Looking
Okay,
good.
here we go.
All right. Pretty good distribution here of ideas on what everybody thinks. And some of these are big time crossover items. Some could argue that, all of these collectively are going to be what's necessary. I'm going to go to you, Chris, since you're with an defense manufacturer, space manufacturer, big time high tech. We're enjoying bringing a lot of the technologies from the space industry, more than just Velcro. What is the thing that you think is really the next gen thing as you see the future vertical lift program gaining traction and getting further down the road? What's next on the horizon that is most likely to benefit the commercial aviation industry, helicopters in particular?
Sure. So as you mentioned, the FVL is progressing along. Boeing and Sikorsky joint submission for the FLRAA, Future Long Range Attack Aircraft, Assault Aircraft, was submitted yesterday, and that's a huge step forward in technology. We're talking a coaxial compound helicopter, very fast, very capable, in the footprint basically of a Black Hawk that will be able to go greater than 250 knots. So amazing technology there, and really looking forward to see the continued development on that. Our Defiant demonstrator is out there flying and setting new records frequently. So we're really excited about that. But what's going to be in the civil world sooner than that is some of the autonomy technology that we've been working along with our Matrix program. We've demonstrated in an S-76B aircraft, big, 11,700 pound aircraft, the ability to basically fly it from an iPad with no training whatsoever. So while we do have a safety pilot on board while we're doing these demonstrations, the iPad is controlling the aircraft, saying, okay, lift off, fly over here, set down here, pick this up and go over there. And we're doing that with untrained folks. We've demonstrated it with reporters who are notoriously bad helicopter pilots. Apologies for all you helicopter pilot reporters out there, but people who have never flown a helicopter were able to pick up this iPad and control this 11,000 pound S-76 and do amazing things with that. So I think we're looking at the optionally piloted aircraft to not eliminate the pilot, but to assist the pilot and allow the pilot to become a mission manager and have the aircraft do some of the dirty work, staying away from the obstacles, staying away from the ground, and keeping everybody safe. So I think that autonomy is really the next big thing for the civil aircraft market.
Excellent. Thanks. Great answer, Chris. Loreto, any thoughts on what you think the next big thing is, and a little discussion on that?
Well, if we think in the vertical aviation, not only helicopters, in the whole group of VTOL, well, I think that the artificial intelligence will be a key. Maybe Francisco can explain more of that. But in my perspective as well, the traffic management is going to be very, very sensitive, very, very important. Here in Chile, we have thousands of drones that are not controlled by the authority. They are not able, they don't have the capability to control. And the authority here is overwhelmed, absolutely overwhelmed. They don't know what they are going to do in the future, and nobody is thinking or making plans in the long term. No, they think that the advanced air mobility is like science fiction, and it's not. It's just around the corner. Nobody's thinking on that. So I think, I'm afraid here, Latin America, we are going to depend a lot in the technology. But well, I think that artificial intelligence is very, very important, and maybe Francisco can explain a little bit.
Okay, Francisco, dive right in. Artificial intelligence.
Well, we often focus our attention on the hardware. The glass cockpit, the last camera in the vertical fin, or any other fancy stuff. But I guess that we need to look for the data, which is less sexy, but is important as well. You probably heard that big data is gonna change the way we live, we work, and how we think. I guess it's gonna change how we fly. It's artificial intelligence, AI, is no longer a futuristic theory. It's operating now in some machines in the H160. It's not only on autonomous flight. So the question is what to do with all of that data we have from flight data monitoring, all the hams, how to process, analyze, and get insights that allow us to fly safer. So there is no other moment in the history where we have that amount of information available for us to make an advance. So I'm excited to the future. I guess we are gonna have a big step forward in safety soon.
All right.
Actually, there is another option on artificial intelligence. During the review of accidents of the last decade in Chile, we saw a big gap in the data, flight hours. That is a global problem, as you know. But there are some people in the academy using artificial intelligence to investigate accidents and to make the statistics to project what is going to happen in the future. It's not anymore a guess science. It's a real science. So data, artificial intelligence and data is going to be the future for sure.
All right, thanks, Francisco. All right, so I'm going to be a party pooper right now. I'm going to bring us back down to earth. So all the R-22 pilots out there, like, come on, guys, seriously, you know, and if you talk to some of these folks out there, like, it's going to be a long time before the average pilot is going to be able to take advantage of these technologies we're talking about. So I'll go to you first, Chris. What do you think? Let's say an R-44 pilot, or what are they going to benefit from the most in that list that we saw at the beginning? What's your opinion based on your expert investigations, that sort of thing?
I think there's a lot of things that we can do that will help every pilot, from the smallest R-22 or small aircraft to the largest. And some of that is just that situational awareness. So if you look at some of the technology on iPads like ForeFlight and things like that, where we can get a real good live situational awareness of where I am, what's the protected airspace around me, where are the antenna towers that could be a problem. Things like that gives a huge step forward in knowing where you are and what you're doing. Now, clearly, we don't want a VFR, VMC pilot to be focused on his iPad 100%, but just having that there in the cockpit as a belts and suspenders to kind of give him that a little bit of guidance and a little bit of a warning, like, hey, there's a terrain clearance issue coming up in 6 miles. Give him time to start getting out of the way. I think that's the biggest one.
Right. Yeah, and automatic flight control systems. It was 20 years
Bruce,
ago. Yeah. If you weren't flying around a $10 million helicopter, you didn't have an autopilot. Yep. Now they're economical. And, quite honestly, when you look at light aircraft, let's say an R-44 and above, there's a lot of good justification to install a system like that. And when you look at the potential to improve safety, it's significant. But I'll link that back to training. If you don't use those systems when you don't need them, when you do need them, you will not use them. You will revert to how you fly. You'll go back to hand flying. Don't do that. Buy these automatic flight control systems, whether it's just a 2-axis system, that's fine. But then when you're flying from point A to point B and it's 10 miles and you normally hand fly it, engage the autopilot, couple up, become familiar. It should just be muscle memory. So it doesn't have to, all training doesn't have to be formal, kind of what Chris said earlier. When you're just deadheading somewhere, or you're going home, or you're just out to go get a hamburger one afternoon in your R-44, use your systems, use those systems, become familiar with them. So that really, for me, is the fulcrum, all this. I don't care how good your technology is. If you're not comfortable using it, you're not, at minimum, you're neutering its effectiveness at minimum, and maybe doing much worse. So use the technologies that operators, that OEMs provide, that people who build aftermarket equipment provide, but then make sure you're familiar enough with it so you can use it reliably, effectively.
Good stuff. And you'd be happy to know that William Hart sent a chat to everybody, had his opinion on what he selected, and he kind of touched on a little bit of that hand flying versus automation. You need to have a good balance of both, but you don't want to do too much of one at the expense of the other, and then try to revert to the one you don't train. Right. It's going to get you into trouble in a real hurry.
Any pilot will ask, well, how many hours do you have in that helicopter? And that's a tricky question, because I got a hell of a lot of time riding around in a helicopter watching the autopilot fly. I mean, quite honestly, and that's not misusing the helicopter. In fact, I pose, if I'm flying a helicopter with an automatic flight control system, let's just make it a very large aircraft. Let's use a 92, a 225, something like that. And I am hand flying the vehicle. I'm kind of misusing it. You don't buy a ship like that to be out there hand flying it. Use that automation, use that technology, and then manage the systems. That's what the captain does. The captain manages the ship. The captain doesn't need to be steering the ship all the time. Manage it. And that's what this new technology Chris was talking about allows someone, to do with an iPad in effect.
Yeah, and then Jennifer, I'm sure Air Methods and a bunch of the other commercial operators out there have some pretty strict policies. When you have passengers and patients on board, you better be using those systems. We paid a lot of money to put on them. Any thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. We're all about anything that improves our situational awareness. All our crews are trained and use the night vision goggles, not just the pilots. We've got our simulators where we make sure everyone is up to speed on all the equipment, on all the various different models we fly. So yes, we totally agree.
Right.
All right, good.
Right.
All right, that's a good one. So we haven't talked a lot about dull, dirty, and dangerous. Chris, talk to me a little bit about that. What's the future of those types of missions in reality, and how soon?
Right. So I think it is going to be relatively soon where we allow the aircraft, the automation that Bruce was talking about, the artificial intelligence that Francisco has mentioned, to operate aircraft on complete autonomous missions where we don't want to put anybody in danger. And if we look at some of our statistics in the US, we know that agriculture application accounts for a very high number of fatal accidents because they're down low, they're in the wire environment, they're operating on a very time critical schedule because they've got to get the agent on the field as soon as possible. So for those sorts of missions, I think we're going to see a lot of not just helicopter autonomy, but other vertical lift autonomous aircraft flying and performing those down low, dangerous, and dull missions where we just can't afford to continue to put humans at risk in that kind of environment.
You're going to upset all those guys who are flying.
I know,
but cranberry orchards.
I'm just trying to save lives, man.
Yeah, it's this reality. There's a lot of flight time potential that those folks that would ordinarily build that flight time, that those types of missions may be taken away from them. So it's going to be harder to gain that flight time. So the tough questions about proficiency, quality of training, all of that stuff's going to be coming to a head real soon when they start supplanting some of those missions.
But the guys at Chernobyl putting concrete in the reactor core, they're not complaining. They would have loved to have had an autonomous vehicle. Right.
And there was a few years ago where when deadliest catch was really popular and crab fishing was the most dangerous industry, where I beg to differ because cherry drying operations out in Washington and Oregon, there were several fatal accidents that year. And I think that was more dangerous than crab fishing that year. So those are the kind of things where we really need to come up with a better plan.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, Jennifer, back to something you said, and I think it's super critical, is that it's not only how to use the technology that's embedded in the aircraft, it's the discipline not to use things that may distract you, like cell phones, or we need to exercise discipline in the cockpit. Don't be talking about lunch when you're shooting your approach to a rooftop pad. I mean, sterile environment doesn't mean it's silent, but it does mean it shouldn't be frivolous BS.
All business.
And we have to realize that it's not only what we want to use, it's what we don't want people to use. And all this technology allows us as pilots to step back and be more well-rested. I'll use vibration. So the smoother the helicopter, people think, we make them smoother so that the passengers are more comfortable. Well, that's true, but we also make them smoother because that's less pilot fatigue. Noise is the same way. We make them more quiet so that they are more palatable to the non-flying public, but it also makes them more palatable to the flying public and, quite honestly, the flight crew. A ship that's quieter in the cockpit is less fatiguing to fly. So there's a lot that goes into this, and it's complex.
Yeah, and we touched on it briefly. I'd like to talk a little bit about the knowing your technology, having the right training, and then being overly reliant on it in the wrong situation. So automation complacency is a term that some of us learned growing up, where we relied too much on it when you need to be going back to the analog or the manual mode. Any thoughts on that?
Right. Well, maybe something Francisco would like to
Francisco, take a crack at that.
Yeah.
There, automation complacency.
A moment ago, Chris said something about that. Cherry drying is a job that we still do here. Actually, a couple of weeks ago, I did it. And it's a complacency thing, because you have to fly during night or during day, lines and lines for hours over a low level flight with obstacles. So it's a routine maneuver. And I see one guy in the chat put it on he's working on the KMX helicopter to do that job. There are many unmanned air vehicles that do that job now. Mm-hmm. So the question is, when is gonna be no pilot on board doing that kind of jobs, mm-hmm. Dirty jobs, as you said. It's mm-hmm. a low level, very risky, very bored jobs. I guess there's a wide space there for innovation.
Right. Yep. And it's something else that, so my statistic may be off, but it's not off by much. When you look at accident statistics, when we distill it down to the emergency procedure being ineffectively applied, in other words, the engine quit, but the pilot couldn't do an auto or something like that, it's less than 2% of the accidents, less than 2%. So again, I'm certainly saying we need to be capable and competent of executing basic maneuvers, always. But when we look at accident statistics, and that's the data, you know, Chris has spent his life going through this is the data. And I believe that we have to always maintain the ability to fly the machine. We need to be able to do the basic, but most people aren't dying in a helicopter. Let's use an auto rotation as an example. If you enter the auto correctly, most of those turn out with survivors. It's when you don't enter the auto correctly is when it doesn't end up with survivors. So kind of my point is, most helicopter pilots are pretty damn good at auto rotations. They are. But maybe they're not as good at recognizing the need to execute an auto rotation, or keeping themselves out of a situation where they may need to do an auto rotation, or quite honestly, being humble enough to say, you know what, I'm not sure what that noise was, or I'm not sure what that vibration is, but I'm not comfortable. I'm going to stop now. And, you know, don't be ashamed to say, I'm going to check this out on the ground, not while flying.
Yeah.
So
I want to take us two more areas in technology I'd like us to hit on really quickly. We've got just under 15 minutes left before we close out. A couple of items. We kind of breezed past one I think is worth circling back to: the existing technologies that are already there that can enhance safety, and particularly in the training world. Some rather than having your full-blown, fully built-out simulator that does everything, the ones that Air Methods sends their pilots to routinely. And you know, Chris, your folks are HMX-1 pilots. You're probably putting them in a pretty good simulator as well. What about those lower tech options? Virtual reality simulators are coming online. We're going to have at the safety booth of the Heli Expo this March 8th through 10th, we're going to have a couple of virtual reality simulators right there, just to demonstrate what is in the realm of the possible at a lower price point. How would you characterize the value of these, Francisco?
I get excited with that. The virtual reality simulators. There is for Robinson's 22 and for H125. I guess it's a good option for low-cost training. As I said before, it's not only maneuvers what you need to train, it's scenarios. Put pilots in different scenarios so they have time to make a wise decision.
Yeah,
so,
speaking of decision there, Francisco, that's the key. You don't even have to be in an active high-tech situation.
Absolutely.
Sitting in a cockpit in a hangar, a broken cockpit for that matter. Maybe your company has a down aircraft for maintenance, but you can sit there in the cockpit and go through some aeronautical decision-making drills, things of that nature. It's not the sexiest thing in the world, but it's important. So many things come down to the poor decisions that were made. You could trace those back.
Right. Right. And Chris said, you know, he had a person tell him all accidents are human factors. And I do agree with that. And we often forget about the technicians. Virtual reality technology for technicians is super important. And it's coming along pretty rapidly as well. The ability to see inside that gearbox before you start breaking the case apart. You know, going through a tutorial on how, and we're working on that. I know others are working on that.
Very
So,
high fidelity maintenance training units that are out there that create virtual environments for the decision and touch points, and then shift to tactile when it's necessary. Lots of great stuff out there.
I completely agree. And Bruce, I think even the augmented reality for the technicians is a great thing. So you're looking through a HoloLens or some equivalent device, and you're looking at an actual engine, but it's highlighting, okay, here's the doohickey that you need to unscrew over there, not this one. Don't mess with that one. That's the bad one. It's a technical term. I hope you got that. Yeah, that's an industry term. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely right. Right.
Kind of like posittraction, right? For those who might know history of movies there. Okay, one more item to talk about in the simulation world. Something that's coming out are some of these incremental visors that can incrementally draw down your perceived vision and actually flying them in the aircraft. There's a couple of companies out there, AT Systems and Icarus. There's probably a few more that are on the horizon, and then even lower tech systems that don't necessarily have all that whiz bang capability. Just the old fashioned hood is still something useful to get into the aircraft and use. Let's shift to one final item, and that is, we're spending a lot of money, and it was, I don't recall how many people touched on it or if it was even one of the options, but prevention systems preventing the accident. But what happens if you can't prevent the accident? Can you reduce the severity of the accident? And those are the protection systems, whether they protect the damage to the airframe in the sky, like for bird strike mitigation or attenuation or prevention or avoidance, or structures, you know, and you know, hardened structures, that sort of thing. Sikorsky, you guys partnered with some folks at the very beginning in the military to create some of the most survivable airframes in the world. And I suspect you'd like to brag about that a little bit. How are we doing on the transition of those systems into the commercial world?
Well, we definitely take a lot of the lessons that we've learned in those applications and put them into the civil and commercial products as much as possible. But because the missions are so very different, there's many times where we're not able to do that. But one of the things that you really need to understand from a survivability aspect is survivability is a system. So if we have an aircraft that was designed to the standards in 1962, and we put a really sophisticated energy absorbing seat in it, it's not going to help because this airframe is not stressed to be able to react the loads that are generated on a crashworthy energy absorbing seat, and it will just rip out of the airframe. So you have to understand that safety has to be an entire system that's integrated from the ground up, and that the whole aircraft is designed around that. So while we can make incremental improvements sometimes by adding various aspects for survivability, the best increase in survivability is an integrated system where it is all functioning together and designed together to work in that way. So absolutely, those aircraft that you spoke of, you know, Black Hawk and Boeing's Apache, take a lot of the lessons that were learned in Vietnam from earlier generation aircraft, and retention of high mass items like the transmission and engines to keep them from coming down into the cabin, containing the fuel systems, energy absorbing seats, anti-plowing fuselage structure. All of those were lessons learned the very, very hard way by the fatal accidents that occurred in Vietnam particularly. So when the military specified the design requirements for the Apache, for the Black Hawk, those were some of those lessons that were learned, and again, the hard way, and made to create some of the most survivable and structurally sound aircraft that have ever been built.
Great summary there. So we could go on and on about that. So, well, we have just a little over 7 minutes, but I want to give a chance to go around the horn and give each of you an opportunity to just What do you think that we talked about today that you want to make sure sticks in everybody's head? The most important takeaway for, let's just say, the small operator, the personal private operator, as it relates to the future safety, what they can do now and what they can expect to do in the future. I'll start with you, Jennifer.
Yeah, I think, SMS programs are going to be a thing for everyone eventually, right? So I think it's important to lay the groundwork now. And like you said, you don't have to get all the way to the finish line, but start implementing those programs and those policies and getting your folks up to speed on what that looks like and building out those safety cultures with with a just culture. So really planting that seed and getting things moving and making sure you can have the safest organization you can.
Thanks, Jennifer, and congratulations to you on the SMS VP approval, and good luck to you continued in your career. Francisco, any key takeaways for you?
More than techies, I strongly agree with Jennifer, is the just culture or safety culture, as you want to name it. The key on safety. The awareness of the risk. I'm not sure if all the pilots all the time are really conscious of the risk they face. So we have to end that cowboy mentality. This is the key for me and for the listeners.
Thank you. Great advice on that one. Loreto, any thoughts?
Well, I think for me is to always get involved. Be aware, don't wait for the authority to do something, not wait for the regulation to put the level. You put your own level, yeah, but for that you need to get involved, basically.
Great, appreciate that. Chris Lowenstein.
Yeah, I think as everybody has said, SMS is a key to our future safety, and recognize that you're probably doing a good percentage of it, maybe 75%, maybe 90% of everything that's required. You just haven't integrated it all together and put it under that umbrella of SMS. So don't be overwhelmed. I think everybody can do it, from the smallest operator to the largest, and recognizing that culture is a very, very hard thing to change. That's probably the hardest part of SMS, is changing that safety culture. But to paraphrase that commercial that was on during the Olympics, you don't have to be great to get started, but you have to start to be great. So just get started, and you can do it.
Excellent, appreciate that, Chris. Okay, Bruce, back here in the studio. Any closing thoughts from you?
So I guess I'll be slightly divergent. I'll go to training. And I think it's not only the conventional training that we're familiar with, how to operate the aircraft, how to maintain the aircraft, but it's also the soft skills. How to engage in your customer, how to tell your customer that, the weather is insufficient for safe flight, and how to do that in a way that that allows them to agree and be comfortable with your decision. How to engage with your, again, subordinates, peers, in a way, or superiors, in a way that gets your message across. It's non-confrontational, and at the end of the day, it is safe. And I think that, those things, those non-conventional improvements in our behavior / training, they don't cost much. They take time and some thoughtful introspection. And we're not crashing helicopters very often because, we have these egregious malfunctions. It's usually, we look at James Reason's model, those Swiss cheese holes. The problem with them is they're moving and they're changing diameter. So, we don't live in a static space. So let's be a little more open to improving ourselves. Let's not point at others and say, you need to do better. You need to provide me with something. What can I do today to be a better pilot today, to be a better manager?
Yeah, excellent point on that. And Steve Cusack, thanks for the shout out, and all of you who've been reaching in. Great feedback from everybody. And one of the comments I saw earlier, it just said what he said, or something like that. I agree with what he said. So Chris, Francisco, Bruce, You all get credit for what he said, that you got it right. Thanks. It's been an honor sitting at this round table with all of you. Thank you so much for your insights. Again, to the audience, thank you for tuning in and sticking with us this long through the 90-minute seminar. I think it was very, very informative. I learned a lot. I continue to improve my trade by just being around all of you. So I ask you to stay with me for a moment. Dan's going to come on and say goodbye, and then we'll all turn our cameras off and let Dan close out the rest.
Thanks, Chris. And please allow me to express my appreciation to Chris, to Francisco, to Loreto, to Jennifer as well. We are grateful that you took your time out of your day to join us. I know that these are, there's a lot more goes into these webinars than what most people realize. And so the fact that you're taking the time to help improve the industry is really noteworthy, and we are grateful for you.
All right, thanks, Dan. I'm putting the proverbial hook into all of you. We're coming off the stage, all right? Take care. And back to you, Dan.
No problem. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, let's go ahead and talk about what's coming up next. For next week, we have a Fly Neighborly training, the latest on the Robinson R66. We've already done the R20, or excuse me, the R44 and a couple of other aircraft. And so we know that these are, they're not the most dynamic, but man, are they helpful. Everybody knows what noise complaints are like. They're never good. And so if we can fly more neighborly and reduce noise complaints, it just makes it life better for everyone as well. Coming up on September 23rd and September 30th, we have back-to-back webinars on sustainable aviation fuels. You'll often see it listed as SAF or SAF. This is also something that's going to be great for our industry in terms of promoting what we're doing for greenhouse gases. The first one on September 23rd is just the basics. Sustainable Aviation Fuel 101. What is it? How is it made? What blends work best? Where can you find it? The following week, we're going to talk to some of the CEOs and then some of the subject matter experts from several of the OEMs and at least one engine manufacturer. And they'll tell you that the fuel works great in their airframes. And so we're looking forward to both webinars. We hope you can join us. All of our webinars are at 4 p.m. Eastern time each week. We'll send the links out through email, through social media, and of course in Rotor Daily. We look forward to having you join us on those. We will be sending out a questionnaire shortly. We would like to get your feedback. I was looking through some of the past ones just today, as a matter of fact. We'd like to find out what we did right, what we did wrong, you know, what you think we could do better. We also would like to know what topics you'd like to know more about. That's always really important to me, since I'm the guy who's making the phone calls a lot of the time and trying to bring people in. Also, if there's something HEI can do for you, if something we could do better, something we could do different, if you appreciate the fact that we're doing something at all, let us know. And the easiest way to do that is to contact our president, Jim Viola, at president@rotor.org. Send him an email, let him know what you think. He does see all those emails, and he does send them around to staff for tasking if he doesn't respond himself. That does bring us to a close for today. We are grateful that you took your time out of your busy schedule to join us, every bit as much as we appreciated the panelists. We know that you are very busy in our industry, and we are grateful that you took the time out to discuss safety today. Until next week, we ask that you be safe and that you fly safe, and we'll see you again very soon.